Hi guys, welcome to our Unit 1 of COVID-19 Core. To work in this unit, we're going to be using a couple of different tools. We have our PowerPoint. Okay, so I have a link there to our PowerPoint, which is right here. Okay, and I have all the slides downloaded so they're easy access. We're also going to be working with a New York Times article, so let's go take a look at that. And in this article, we're looking at logarithmic graphs. And that's what we're going to be learning about in this unit, because by looking at logarithms, we're going to be able to better talk about and understand COVID-19. So if we're thinking about the number of cases of COVID-19 in Italy, right? There's a lot of COVID-19 in Italy, but there's even more COVID-19 in New York, okay? So if we think about that, how can we start comparing COVID-19 in Italy to COVID-19 in New York? In New York, we know there's more people, so we would expect that there would be more cases. Okay, so how can we make those numbers be comparable, kind of apples to apples? And if we think back to GDP, right, back in the beginning of the semester, we're learning about GDP. If we were to look at our country's GDP, here's the United States, our GDP is very big, right, compared to most of the rest of the world, including Italy. Okay, so there's Italy with a much smaller GDP than the United States. Okay, however, if I was to look at GDP per capita, right, because the United States has a lot more people than Italy, so we would expect the United States to have a larger GDP because there's more people that are producing goods and services. If we were to look at GDP per capita, okay, over here, suddenly we see countries that have a per capita income of more than $50,000 apiece. Here we have the United States, and here we have Italy. Okay, so they're both dark purple, they're equal. So our per capita is equal, our GDP per capita is equal in the United States and Italy, more or less, okay? But our GDP as a country is much, much greater than the GDP of Italy. Make sense? So what we're doing when we take that GDP and we create it into a GDP per capita, we're dividing the total earnings of the entire country, right? All of the goods and services, the value of the goods and services divided by the total population of the country, and that's giving us that per capita number. So when we start looking at coronavirus and we start understanding how is the pandemic affecting people and how is it growing, we're going to be using that same mindset, that same logarithmic way of thinking that we just looked at with the per capita GDP. We're going to be looking at a per capita rate of increase of coronavirus. Okay, and this article is introducing this idea to us, right? When we look at the data plotted on a logarithmic scale, okay, we start seeing something that's different than if we're just to plot it as in cases that have been reported. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So here we have coronavirus cases in Italy and the United States. Okay, so here in Italy, we have coronavirus, starting in February, and they had an incredible increase, right, of cases, very, very steep. And here we are, this ends at the end of March 19th, and Italy has a lot of cases. The United States was just starting to get cases in March, okay, and by March 19th, we're well on our way to, hitting our first 15,000 cases. Now, if we were to take this exact same data and plot it not by number of cases, but number of cases per 1,000 people, okay, putting it on that logarithmic scale, all of a sudden we're starting to see something very different, okay? Now we're starting to see how is this number of cases growing in relation to the actual numbers in the country. And we're seeing how the United States started out at a slightly higher rate, but we grew a little bit more slowly than Italy, who went poop and had very, very fast numbers of cases increasing over that same period of time. And the United States, our increase is a little bit less, but it's starting to catch up. Okay, so we're going to take a look at what does that mean? How do we develop a logarithmic scale? How do we look at information over time? Okay, and how do we look at the rate at which information is changing? Okay, so that's our introduction. I'm going to go back here to our to our canvas. Here it is. All right, we're going to be using two other links. We're using Our World Data and we're using the Corona Tracker. Okay, so the Corona Tracker, these are updated links to this information, and it's giving us the total number of deaths as of April 17th. Okay, so this is updated information. As you continue to look at this, it will continue to update. Today is April 17th, so that's why we're seeing the information up until that time. The other piece is our corona deaths by US state and country over time. That's the daily tracker, and this was updated on the 16th. Okay, so we're going to be looking at this, and this lets us compare what's going on from country to country. So we have these two dynamic live data sources that we'll be using as we're going to start understanding what is happening with corona in the United States and how do we understand a pandemic as an economist. Okay, if I go back to Canva, I'm going to see that I have my workbook too. I can click on that. And I have the introduction video you've probably already watched that shows you how we're going to be interacting with this unit. Now we're going to take a look at those pages 11 to 13. We'll also be working with slides 1 through 13. Okay, so the first thing that we start off with here is we look at history's hockey stick. All right, so this comes back from our core 1.1b. And what we want to be doing is looking at two different reasons why that hockey stick formed, right? In this one, we're looking at economic growth, right? So go back and think about how did economic growth change in this period of time, okay? So give me a country. Let's say I was going to take China, okay? Give me a period of time. What am I looking at? Am I looking at China from 1800 to 2000? Okay, and what was that cause of the economic growth? Okay, so let's say I was going to go to, here we'll do Britain because we've been working with Britain so much, right? And Britain had this curve much earlier. So my reason one is going to be I had a industrial revolution. And we learned about the Industrial Revolution in Britain and why it took place there, because we had that high cost for labor, so it made more sense to invest more in machinery to offset those labor costs. This took place in Britain, okay, which led to the development of machinery and specialization and efficiencies and led to a very steep change in their economic growth, right? That increase in their economic growth. So this took place from 1600 right to about 1800, I'm going to say. That's kind of where we really started to see that curve take off. So 1600 to 1800 plus, okay? And that cause of the economic growth was going to be that machines became more efficient and effective at producing goods and services than just human labor. We had then we had new industries created, right? Okay, as people left the farms and started working more in the cities, so we had more services and we had specialization, right? Where somebody was no longer making a full pair of shoes, but instead they were able to make the sole of the shoes. And then they worked in a factory and they got paid to make soles of shoes. And then the money that they earned from the factory, they could go out and buy other products. Okay, thus the need for more services, specialization, and also just more products in general. I'm using Grammarly here. This is a great tool if you guys aren't familiar with it already, which helps us with our spelling, our punctuation. So definitely recommend that. Okay, look at that. Okay, So, and then reason number two, you guys get to think of that, right? So you might want to choose China and talk about, how did China kind of jump into all of this economic growth suddenly in the 1900s, right? Or looking at Japan, right? How did Japan get in at the end of the 1800s? So go back, look at that. Okay, so it helps us remember, right? This hockey stick that we had worked with in the past. So now what we're going to be doing is looking at the linear growth of COVID-19. Look at that. All of a sudden we have this similar hockey growth, okay? And this comes from slide 9. So if I go to my PowerPoint here and I take a look at some of the information that's being presented, and let's do this in a nice big format, okay? We have this question of, is COVID-19 actually another hockey stick? And that's what we're going to be taking a look at, right? How are we going to understand that? Okay. And we're looking at daily growth rates. And we have some mathematical equations. Okay. And we're going to be taking a look at that in the next video that I'll make you, where we're looking at how many cases and how long is it going to take for the number of cases to increase over a certain period of time. Okay, and we're going to come back to that in a moment. Here we're looking at the daily growth rate, okay? And here we're looking at where are countries having their cases doubling every 2 days, right? So if I have one case on Monday, well, let's say I have 2 cases on Monday, then Tuesday, Wednesday, by Wednesday I'm going to have 4 cases, right? And if that's going to double, then by Friday, right, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm going to have 16 cases. So we can see how, as we're looking at that type of doubling, when my 16 cases double, how many am I going to have then, right? I have to do 16 times 16. I have my calculator out, and let's see what we get with this. 16 times 16. I'm going to have 256 cases, right? And that puts me now at Sunday, right? So I started out with 2 cases on Monday, 4 cases on Wednesday, 16 cases on Friday, and 256 cases by Sunday. So that's where we're starting to see that exponential growth, okay? Here we're looking at data sources, our world data, which we're going to be using, the total confirmed COVID-19 cases, okay, and places that we can start looking at tests per capita and tests performed. Okay, and here we have the idea of the linear model. So these are the total confirmed cases. Okay, here we can see the United States, we can see Italy, Germany, France, United Kingdom, and this was March 26th. This is a linear model. This is one case, one dot. Moving forward, we have something here called total confirmed cases, but now this is the logarithm. Okay, and we're going to go into that in just a moment. So let's pause here. We're going to go back to our workbook, and we're going to first look at that linear graph. And we want to think about, what does this graph tell us about the growth of COVID-19? Okay, and what I can say here is that it's growing steeply in Italy. Okay, I see the United States, though, is actually even looking steeper. More recently, right? Looks like that line's going straight up. I see the United Kingdom is more gradual, right? Okay, what country has the highest growth? Let's see, it looks like Italy has the highest growth, right? Because I'm looking right here at the one that's up on top, okay? Which country has the lowest? I would say that's the UK. And why, right? Why does the UK have a lower amount of growth than Italy? And here I have that I can reference current events for this. So this is March 26th. This is Italy. So what I might do is think about March 26th, COVID-19 growth. and see what comes out. Okay. And here I have my daily update on March 26th on the S&P. I have my coronavirus updates. I have different charts. Okay, I have this idea that there's a long process. I really want to make sure I'm looking at that March 26th. Okay, and here we have, can the US flatten the curve? I'm having Italy's rate is slowing. Okay, Italy suffers a setback. I'm going to take a look at that one, right? I'm not going to take the survey. And this is from March 26th. Okay. And I can think about what is going on in Italy that's causing this to happen so quickly. Okay, so I'm having a lot of people dying in the last 24 hours. It's doubling. And even though they're having a lockdown, and I can find out that actually what happened was, let's see if we have this. So anxiety in the South. Okay, so I can find out what actually happened was right before we had the coronavirus hit in Italy, we had Carnival. And in Milan, there was a lot of people that were out celebrating Carnival in the streets. Okay, and by that happening, then people were having a lot of social contagion. Okay, here I'm flipping through some pictures in Milan. But people were having a lot of social contagion at that time without having the symptoms, right? So it was a time that people didn't realize that there was so much contagion, or they weren't taking things as seriously, and we're starting to see an event where people were more close together. And we can say that was what was causing our growth to be happening in Italy. Okay, there had been events, and we actually saw that happen in the United States too, where we had a huge amount of corona come out of Louisiana right after Carnival there. And we're seeing that in Florida as well. After kids were together for spring break, we're seeing corona jumping out from down in Florida, and we're also seeing it tracked by the spring break celebrators back to their own home states. Okay, so we can see that, so we can learn from current events that people's close proximity spreads this virus, right? So it's spread by contagion from close proximity. And if we remember back in Boston, where we had the big spread there, it was from a conference, right? So sometimes the close proximity can be from celebrations like Carnival. It can be from, parties and events such as spring break. It can be from conferences. Okay, but what we have is people who are together from many different places, okay, and they might not have their symptoms yet, but they're causing the virus to be spread. And then we're seeing that being reflected in the countries, okay? So here what we're looking at is the Unit 1 economic hockey stick measured the growth rate as growth equals the change in income divided by the original level of income. So here comes our math, okay? What I'm going to do is take a break here, and I'll make this as a separate video so that it's not so much information at once for you guys, and it becomes easier for you to follow. So I'm going to pause right here. We've looked now at the hockey stick number 1 and number 2, okay, these linear models, and now we're going to move into the exponential and look at how do we understand growth rate and numbers per day, and we're going to look at the logarithmic models. So I'm going to take a break and post this, and then I'll be back.